Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on From Pre-K to Workforce, County Educational Data, and How to Strengthen the Pipeline. We're really excited about today's conversation, and we're really glad to welcome all of you to this, what we feel like is a very important and very timely conversation that all of us need to be thinking a lot about in our regions and in our communities. I want to go over just a few logistics of the meeting for you as we get started here. Next slide. As you enter the room, you are muted, and we ask that everyone please stay muted until the point later on in the program when you may have a question you'd like to ask. But if everybody would make an attempt to stay muted, we'll make sure we don't have any interference with the presenters as they're going through their presentations. Also, if you're having trouble connecting both video and audio, just a reminder that you can use your phone, and that may give you better audio quality for the call. And please submit your questions to the panelists via the Q&A feature, and feel free to do that throughout the presentations in the early part of this webinar. Next slide. And we encourage all of you to please join us on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter. There are the various handles, and we encourage you to be active on social media as you're listening and receiving this information today. Now, on behalf of the North Carolina Rural Center, I just want to welcome everyone again to this very important conversation. We have really tried over the recent months to bring really outstanding and timely content to you that we believe is really relevant and very important. For the Rural Center, it's incredibly important that we think about connecting our workforce and the skill sets of our workforce with the job availability that we have throughout the state, throughout our regions, and our local communities. And this is a very important conversation at a statewide level. We are very pleased to welcome two of our most important partners that are going to give some great information to you. From My Future NC, you'll be hearing from Cecilia Holden, the president and CEO of My Future NC and her staff, and you'll also be hearing from our good friend, Dr. Rebecca Tippett, the director of Carolina Demography at UNC Chapel Hill, as she goes through the data profiles at a county level. The first time I saw this information, Jenny Korn was offering an early glimpse at what these county profiles looked like, and I was so impressed with the amount of work that had gone into developing that county level information. I think it's incredibly useful. I hope you find it an incredibly useful tool and one that you will use in your conversations in your local community about this important topic. Let me say that throughout the 3 decades of work of the North Carolina Rural Center, we are constantly asked to give presentations either on the state of rural North Carolina or a status update on how we are doing in rural North Carolina. And let me just say that education is always one of those slides, has always been an important part of that overall presentation. For many years, that education slide was all about measuring high school diploma attainment. How were we doing in terms of how many high school graduates did we have in our communities? And I can tell you now, and you all know it as well as I do, that high school diploma is no longer a measure of success, or no longer the way that we really measure success. We have to be thinking about post-secondary attainment. I'm really impressed with the job My Future NC has done in laying the groundwork for this statewide conversation from the beginning. It is they laid the groundwork for a very much a bipartisan conversation that has been joined from all sides of the conversation in North Carolina to emphasize and to agree on an attainment goal for the state, and one that we all are committed to reaching and must reach as a state if we're going to remain economically competitive. Thank you for your presence today. We encourage you to use that Q&A feature, ask your questions, engage these speakers as you have time with them today. And it is my pleasure to introduce and turn it over to Cecilia Holden, President and CEO of My Future NC. Welcome, Cecilia.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I just want to do a sound check. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. So I just want to welcome a lot of great visitors for today across the state. We are thrilled with the interest that you all have expressed in showing up for the webinar today. A very special appreciation to the Rural Center and Patrick in particular for hosting and allowing us to be able to share the message around the importance of educational attainment and our state educational attainment goal. So with that, I'm just going to jump right in. The very first thing that I'll do today is to share with you the problem that we're trying to solve, a little bit about the history of My Future NC, and then also where we are today and where we plan to go in terms of our path forward. So what is it that we're trying to solve? North Carolina has a talent pipeline crisis. There's no better way to put it. We've got 2/3 of the jobs in North Carolina that require some level of education after high school, but less than half of North Carolinians between the ages of 25 and 44 have the education that's necessary to fill the jobs that we have today, let alone moving forward. You couple that with the North Carolina Department of Commerce Employer Needs Survey, and employers have indicated that half of North Carolina employers can't find the skilled workers that they need in order to fill the jobs that we have. So there were two ladies in North Carolina, very influential leaders, who had a passion to try to solve the talent pipeline crisis. The first is Margaret Spellings. She's the former UNC system president, and also MC Belk Pylon. MC is the president of the John M. Belk Endowment. She's also one of our funders, and she serves on the My Future NC board. These ladies came together. They created a commission called the My Future NC Commission, and these were very influential leaders across the state. They came together, looked at a lot of research, listened to a lot of subject matter experts, looked at a bunch of data, and at the end of about a 2-year window, it was determined that North Carolina needed to establish a goal, an educational attainment goal for the state. So the commission decided that 2 million North Carolinians between the ages of 25 and 44 would need to hold a high quality credential or a post-secondary degree by the year 2030 based on all of the research. This was a goal that was established by the commission. However, the General Assembly also took action, and in June of 2019, they codified the goal into law with bipartisan support and a signature of the governor. And they did so in order to make sure that North Carolina remains economically competitive both now and moving forward. So, where are we today if we don't do anything more? Through the work of the commission in partnership with Carolina Demography, it was determined that if the state doesn't take any further action, we're currently slated to fall short by about 300,000 individuals who will not have the credentials or degrees necessary in order to meet the workforce demands by the year 2030. It's important to point out that this data is based on the year 2018. It's the most recent that we have available. And we all know that this is pre-pandemic, and the pandemic has wreaked havoc on our education and workforce system. So during the work of the commission, they wanted to figure out, where are we losing students in this education pipeline? If we need them to get all the way to and through some sort of post-secondary education, where are they falling out? So through the work of Carolina Demography, it was determined that if you take 100 ninth grade students, I'm going to walk you through what happens to them in the course of the education pipeline. First, you end up with 13% who don't complete a high school degree on time. If you take that remaining percentage, you end up with 29% who are going to graduate, but they don't actually go on to post-secondary education within 12 months of high school graduation. And then for those who do actually move on to some sort of college after high school, you end up with 13% who are not going to come back year two. For those who do come back in year two, you end up with 14 additional percentage that falls out and they don't graduate within a 6-year window with a credential or with a 2 or a 4-year degree. Where does that leave us? North Carolina has 31% of those 9th grade students that I just referenced that make it to and through some sort of education after high school, a credential, or a 2 or 4-year degree within 6 years after high school graduation. So we've established this educational attainment goal, but the commissioners knew that it was very important that we move the goal into action. And so the commissioners created a 501c3 nonprofit. And in December of last year, I was brought on board to lead the nonprofit. So we are literally 1 year old as a newly created nonprofit. We have a fantastic board of directors that is made up of all of the leaders that are necessary to be able to really move policy forward and make systemic change across our education and workforce systems. We have the governor's education advisor. We have key policymakers in the General Assembly. We also have CEOs of major corporations, key philanthropists, but we also have all of the leaders from our education sectors. We have the State Board of Education chair, we've got the state superintendent, we have the president of our UNC system, community college system, as well as our independent colleges and universities. One of the first things that we did as a 501c3 nonprofit was to take the call to action report that came as a result of the work of the commission, and we created a 3-year strategic plan. We centered the strategic plan around 3 organizational goals that we will use to guide and frame the work that we do as a nonprofit. The first of these is a shared vision for attainment. As many of you know, we have some great things underway within our education systems, but all of our education systems operate under separate umbrellas. We have K-12 separate from community colleges, from our 4-year colleges, et cetera. And so my Future NC is the only organization in the state of North Carolina that's focused from early education all the way through to the workforce. We believe that collectively and through alignment, the outcomes can be so much stronger. So organizational goal number 1, again, is to have a shared vision for attainment. The second organizational goal is around post-secondary readiness, access, and completion. It's our objective to make sure that students graduate ready for some sort of education after high school, that when they do graduate, they have access to an affordable opportunity. And then finally, that they complete whatever they start. So we want to make sure that they don't invest in education but not get a degree or credential, which would result in a return on that investment. The third organizational goal that's referenced here is education and labor market alignment. It is so important that whatever education students are receiving actually aligns with jobs that are high demand, high growth, but also pay a living wage. In our work, we recognize that there is absolutely no way that we will be able to meet our 2 million by 2030 goal without a significant focus on the underserved and underrepresented populations. This chart here shows that 44% of our public school students are Black, Hispanic, or Indian. If you look at the next slide here, you'll see that those populations tend to have lower levels of educational attainment. So my Future NC is focused on the underserved, underrepresented populations. This will result in economic mobility, as well as an opportunity for us to be able to fill the jobs that we have moving forward. If I'm an individual and I'm looking to go back to college, if I'm an adult, or if I'm looking to graduate high school and move on to some sort of education after high school, it's important for me to understand what's in it for me. Why do I want to invest my time, financial resources in order to go to college or some sort of training after high school? If you look at the chart on the left, this is the why in regards to opportunity to have higher wages. Individuals with a credential or a 2 or 4 year degree stand to make 2 to 3 times as much money as an individual with only a high school diploma or less. If you look at the chart on the right, this demonstrates what we've seen during the current pandemic, what we also saw during the Great Recession. Individuals with a high school degree or less have been 3.5 times more likely to be unemployed during this pandemic and also during the Great Recession. So as a 501c3, what are we doing about this work? I'm not going to cover all of the items that we've been focused on, but when you weave all of these items together through our strategic plan, ultimately, this work will lead to the 2 million by 2030. It is so important that while I talk about being state-led, we are a locally driven goal. Without every one of you on the phone and individuals across all of North Carolina focused around 2 million by 2030, there's no way we'll achieve our goal. So we're state-led, but we're locally driven. So in terms of some of the things that we're doing, I'll hit on some high level. We're always open for anyone to reach out to us directly. But one of the things that we've been able to put forward is a list of policy recommendations that we will take forward to the General Assembly in the long session in 2021. All of our policy recommendations that we'll champion during the long session are cross-sector. So these are the types of policies and funding requests that ultimately may fall through the cracks because you don't have a specific sector focused on them. So the policy recommendations that we have align with our strategic plan. They're again focused on readiness, access, completion, and labor market alignment. I think what this group will certainly want to hear, we have a basic foundational policy recommendation that is 100% centered around broadband. We look at this as a three-pronged approach. This is not just access to broadband, but it's also adoption and affordability. So again, broadband is a basic foundation. It will allow for innovative approaches around education, but most importantly, during the pandemic, the light has certainly been shown on this, that if in fact a student doesn't have access to the internet, immediately there's a gap in their ability to learn. Another opportunity that we've put forward, and one of the focus items for the year has been focused around data. Everything we do is data and research driven. In February, we released the State Attainment Dashboard. This dashboard includes a number of key performance indicators that if we can improve as a state in these areas, ultimately, we will increase educational attainment and be positioned to meet our goal. The next I'm going to hit on lightly, but then Dr. Becky Tippett will come back when I finish and wrap up, and she will do a little bit deeper dive on this for you. But in September, I believe it was, we released 100 county attainment profiles. So every single county across the state of North Carolina has a unique county profile. And these county profiles show where you're performing in regards to educational attainment, key performance indicators. I'm going to hit on the very bottom piece to the left. You'll see there's 3 opportunities for growth that have been identified for each county. This basically shows where the counties can focus their efforts. Recognizing that you can't do all things at once, this will allow you to determine where best to focus moving forward on the front end. When we take all 100 county attainment profiles and we aggregate those up, the top 3 opportunities for growth in terms of the number of counties that have this on their attainment profile. Number 1, increase pre-K enrollment. Research shows if you can increase the number of pre-K enrollment seats, you can ultimately result in higher reading proficiency, and then higher levels of reading proficiency result in higher levels of educational attainment. The second, low performing schools. We need to eliminate the low performing schools and increase the proficiency of the students in those schools. Number 3 is FAFSA completion. This has been one of the things that we focused on in the month of June, and we will have a significant focus in January through June of 2021. FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. Research shows that if you can get individuals to complete this FAFSA form, ultimately they will recognize that Education after high school is an affordable opportunity for them too. So higher percentages of students who complete the FAFSA go on to education after high school as compared to those who don't complete it. In 2019, it's estimated that we left about $89 million on the table in Pell Grants alone. Students who complete the FAFSA, this also enters them into the pool for North Carolina state needs-based grants and other scholarship opportunities. So I'm going to save this slide, and at the very end, I'm going to wrap back up, and I'm going to have a call to action for this group. Before we move into Q&A, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Becky Tippett, and she's going to walk you through the county attainment profiles, where I believe you'll find some very useful information for your local communities.
Thank you so much, Cecilia, and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here with you. So I'm going to start with where you'll find the county attainment profiles. And that's something that Jenny, Dr. put in the chat. So this is at dashboard.myfuturenc.org. And this is where you'll go to find all the dashboard and the indicators that we're tracking, but specifically for county data and resources. This is where this page is where you'll really want to go if you want to find out what's going on in your county. Now I want to walk you through what you can find here just because there's a lot of information. So the first thing is you can have a summary PDF of the state. You can also download all 100 county profiles in one bulk download if that's what you want to do. So say maybe you're serving a region, or you just don't want to have to come back to the website, you can download all of them there. There's an FAQ here to understand what's going on if you have questions about the data. But another tool that you might really want is this 100 county attainment profile data summary. And that is every single indicator, and there's well over 50 on the county profiles, plus some additional context and where they came from, with one row for every county, so that you can download that in an Excel file and compare county to county if you would like. We also have some analytical database far down the page. So if you really want to get elbows deep in the data like I do, just know that all of that is available here for download, and you can reach out to us if you have any questions about that. So when you look at the county profiles, so all 100 are available here. And if you have a specific county you want to look at, you can just type that in the list. I'm going to look at Surry County today. And you can see here down at the bottom, we have some additional resources. So keep scrolling down this page if you're really into data. But we want to look at Surry County PDF. And I'm just going to bump this up. Can everybody see this okay? All right. So first things first, I want to just orient you to what is on this page, because Jenny and I did a lot of work. We were trying to make this one page, and we just got so information dense, it's now on 2 pages. But I want to just be really clear about what's on here, why some of these decisions were made, and kind of how we're moving, how we're using it or thinking about using it, and where we have questions. So the first thing is we kind of have this context map. So Surry County's here in blue, and that gray area in the upper right-hand corner is what's called a prosperity zone subregion. We knew that we needed to sometimes use geographies that were larger than a county to capture post-secondary kind of institutions and labor market commuting zones. And we went with this region, which is defined by the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina, because this is the smallest region we have employment projections for and occupational projections for from the Department of Commerce. And this aligns really well with commuting patterns. So that's what that is. The other thing that we knew was that when we started going around at our initial county stakeholders, we had people say, well, we really want to be able to compare ourselves to other counties. And so the next question was, well, who are county peers, and how do we identify peers? And that's where I have to say thank you to our friends at the Rural Center, because we had a great conversation with Jason Gray, and we ended up adopting the Rural Center's definition for urban, suburban, and rural based on population density. And then because there's so many rural counties in the state, we further differentiate those by rural metropolitan and rural non-metropolitan. So Surry County is one of 50 rural non-metropolitan counties in the state. And when you see comparisons to peer counties throughout the county profile, that's referencing Surry in comparison to the 50 county average. The last thing I want to emphasize here is that this is a county profile. It's not a local education agency profile. So you can see in Surrey County, there's actually 3 unique local education agencies, and all of the data for those systems are rolled up into one comprehensive county profile for a picture at the county level of what is going on. So that's kind of some orientation there. Also want to note that these are being continuously updated based on feedback, questions, and comments that we're getting. You can see that this actually is very fresh. This was just updated on December 7th. So this is the newest version of the profile that you are seeing. And some of that came because we had our initial using that prosperity zone subregion did not fully represent the service areas of all community colleges, which sometimes overlap and serve 2 prosperity zone subregions. And we've corrected for that in this profile so that they show up in any region that they serve, as long as so that may mean that they show up on 2 different prosperity zones, but that each county is going to have its community college reflected on its county profile as well. So a little orientation on the top. This blue box is kind of just context, really setting the stage for what's going on in the county. It has the current attainment rate of 25 to 44-year-olds in the county, as well as the current population and the projected population from the state demographer. We have the number of K-12 students listed in traditional schools, as well as the total in charter, private, or home schools. That Excel file that I mentioned earlier, if you really want to break down to how many are in charter versus private versus home schools, we do have that detail in that document. Additional context here is median household income, child poverty rate, and broadband, which again was something that had not been in our first draft, but became very evident that we needed to put that front and center as COVID-19 became and the impacts of the pandemic and virtual schooling became so relevant. So moving down to these white sections here, we kind of have them broken into 4 buckets that align with the fact that My Future NC's attainment goal and really its mission is not just one point in time. It's from birth to career. And so we're starting in pre-K and going all the way to labor market. And wherever possible, we have aligned the county profile with the same indicators that we see on the state dashboard. But in many cases, we're going far beyond what those 18 indicators on the state dashboard, or we are having to use an indicator that's a similar concept, but is not exactly the same. So I'm going to show you exactly what I mean there. So those first 6 bullet points, NC pre-K, college and career ready in reading, college and career ready in math, high school graduation, FAFSA completion, and chronic absenteeism are directly related to an indicator that we are tracking on the state dashboard to compare North Carolina to other states. So all 6 of those indicators have a statewide goal set by the My Future NC Commission and adopted by the board. So that's where we are comparing to a statewide goal. We have another indicator on this profile, disconnected youth, that is also on the state dashboard, but does not yet have a goal. So we're not yet referencing a goal, but that's where you're going to see the reference to a goal here. And we recognize that as COVID goes on and as our measures on these, we're still trying to figure out the best way to start reporting on metrics over time, given the substantial disruption that's going on this year. So we have additional context of low performing schools and meeting or exceeding growth status, but as we get down to ready for college and career, you're going to see it shift away from a reference to the state goal and into a reference to peer counties, because we're moving away from indicators that we have a direct goal for, but we still wanted to provide context into how this compares to other counties like Surrey County. So we have information here, for example, on AP course participation, career and college promise program participation, and career and technical education concentrations earned in the prior year. As we move down to post-secondary access and success, we have student to school counselor ratios. And then I want to emphasize these 3 bullet points in the middle here, because this data is unique to this county profile. This was a data match of high school graduates from DPI matched into the National Student Clearinghouse. This was facilitated with the generous support of the John M. Belk Endowment and the hard work of My Future NC and the UNC system to really understand not just how many students kind of go into a community college or a UNC system school, but this is a national look at, we know that of the 2016 high school graduates from Surrey County, 62% enrolled in a post-secondary institution anywhere in the United States within 12 months. And then we know their persistence and their completion after that. So we're really excited to show that here. And I also want to note that there is additional context on the top schools that county students go to that is available on download on that website I showed you. And also we've worked with the community colleges to build out some dashboards that can really drill down into these indicators in a little bit more detail. So as we move away from high school and that high school to post-secondary transition, we're now moving away from the county view and looking more at the region. So we're starting to look at the prosperity zone sub-region. These three indicators here, apprenticeship and SEED program participation, basic skills at community colleges, and continuing education enrollments are all custom provided by the community colleges for this profile. Last, but definitely not least, we're looking at labor market outcomes. And I wanted to note the first thing here is about we're limited right now because of the data that we have available in the state systems to information on UNC and community college graduates. But this is about, for the students who are graduating from UNC system or community colleges in this prosperity zone subregion, how many are graduating per year? What percent we're working in North Carolina 5 years later, and their average wages. This middle bullet point here is yet again another custom piece of information on this profile that the Labor and Economic Analysis Division at Commerce has pulled together for my future NC. So this is a really interesting element called alignment. And what this number means is that the closer this is to 100%, the more it means that students who are graduating from regional post-secondary institutions have a degree or with a skill, a degree or credential that has a skill in demand in the local job market. So a number closer to 0% means that graduates may have trouble getting employed locally, and that local businesses may need to recruit from outside of the region to fill their jobs. So that's what that number means. And the last section here is on occupational projections right now through 2026. And we anticipate that we should have some new data to update for next year's profile release. So at the bottom here, we have opportunities for growth. And this was identifying where relative to peer counties. So again, for Surry County, this is for other Surry County relative to rural non-metropolitan counties, where there were opportunities for Surry to close the gap with its peer county average. And we identified the three largest gaps. So for Surry County, that was NC pre-K enrollment, school counselors, and disconnected youth. Now, like I said, we tried really hard to keep this to one page, but you can tell we're already in pretty small font as it is. And some of the things we also include on this are information on the largest post-secondary institutions in this region, the number of individuals they enrolled in the most recent year we had data for in undergraduate, and then of undergraduate enrollments, the percent that graduate or transfer out within 8 years. And so that's a metric that we're excited to include on here because it really is the best metric we have for capturing not just four-year program outcomes, but also community college outcomes. And the last thing I want to highlight before we go to Q&A is one of the pieces of feedback that we got when we went out and about first was, this data is great, but it can feel a little bit like a report card. And we're doing a lot of really exciting things here. Is there a way that you can elevate that and lift that up and show what we're doing? And so we were very pleased that we were able to incorporate what we're calling local cross-sector promising practices on the first version of this. Dr. Korn did a lot of heavy lifting, contacting organizations, the community, superintendents, county commissioners, et cetera, to understand what was going on locally. So we have a cross-sector promising practice for every county in the state. If it has a website, this website's available here. Information about it is available here. And we also are trying to build out a comprehensive database of these promising practices so that not only can counties share what they're doing, but that other counties can learn and elevate kind of best practices. So we do have a way that you can provide information on what's going on in your county through a short survey. So again, all of the data and resources underpinning this are publicly available at this URL. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and go back so we can have some Q&A. Thank you so much.
Hey guys, can everybody hear me okay? That's great. So I've been trying to keep up. I feel like I've been keeping up with the Q&A. There were some questions we had about broadband. Thank you, Dan Gerlach, for jumping in and responding on that one. We've gotten a couple of questions about data availability and clarifying question about the students that were included. Let's see the question. Let me see. I just responded to it about whether it was the students that were enrolled in the public schools in Surrey County, for example, not where they went to, you know what I mean? Like you were kind of showing what their track was over time, right, Becky?
Yeah, and so I just want to understand the prosperity zone data. So if we're looking at the enrollment, that is based on the institution of enrollment. But when we're looking at the high school outcomes or the county student outcomes, that is looking at students that live in Surrey County. So for the post-secondary institutions, that could be a little bit of a slippage because we don't have easy access to data that's linked individual to residents and institution.
Great. And then we also got a question about how is My Future NC thinking about some of the inequities that are inside the education to workforce pipeline. I talked a little bit about how next versions of our data work, the local profiles, the dashboard, we're going to be doing some work breaking things out by subgroup. We've gotten a lot of questions about that, when that data by race, by ethnicity, by gender. That was part of that, as well as working with our sector partners to set some goals and to lift up some goals that they're setting. So like our State Board of Education, for example, has set some targets by different subgroups. So making sure that we're lifting up that work on our state level dashboards. We can open it up. I know, let's see if more Q&A questions come in. Let's see, we just got one. There's a question about where the data that, Cecilia, that you cited about half employers need more hireable workers. I don't know if you want to talk about some of that data. I know that you're so familiar with, given your work at Commerce.
Certainly, the North Carolina Department of Commerce issues an employer needs survey. I think that's done every couple of years, if I'm not mistaken. And so employers tell where they're running into problems or what kind of talent that they need. So the data that I cited is based on that employer needs survey. In addition to that, there's also been surveys that have been pushed out. The Wilmington Chamber, the Raleigh Chamber, and Asheville Chamber have pushed out additional surveys to try to figure out where there were talent needs in those specific areas of the state as well.
Great. And the second part of the question is about those essential or soft skills that I know employers are looking for. And that I know it comes up every single year in that Commerce employer survey. I can put the link to the most recent report. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add about that, Cecilia.
No, that's just a common thread that continues. And I think that, we'll want to make sure that our K-12 systems are continually focusing on that, because employers, if we don't have individuals that show up to work, it doesn't matter how skilled they are. And that's often one of the things that I've heard in the field is, can't pass a drug test, don't show up to work, some of the pieces that are unrelated to the skill component. So those are the pieces that need to continue to have focus as well.
Great, thank you. Melissa, we just got a great question. How do we start a local collaborative? How do you know if there's anything, how do we know if we are ready, what the right pieces are? And also go ahead and introduce yourself as you're jumping in.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Melissa Caperton. I'm the Director of Regional Impact at My Future NC. I really appreciate this question. The work that we're doing statewide at the state level is obviously critical to our success, but we also very much recognize the critical role that local communities and leaders are going to play in our state reaching the attainment goal. We have to have that ownership and buy-in at the local level if we're going to do it. So in my role as Regional Impact Director, I will be focused on this locally led work. Let me first give just some context on sort of the resources that we are in the process of building out to support the local work. First, we plan to hire a regional impact manager in each of the 8 prosperity zones to provide technical assistance to local attainment efforts. The local attainment collaboratives and sort of, the vision of it is that they will either be within or across county lines, and will really defer to local communities on what makes sense in your communities, right? Y'all know your communities best. And to help do that work, we're really hoping to identify a champion locally to help us convene the cross-sector leaders, help us drive the work, someone who wakes up in the morning and sort of has this at top of mind. And again, those will be comprised of cross-sector leaders. And they will help, establish goals, identify strategies and priorities to meet those goals, and work as partners of ours. In terms of other resources we're developing, we hope to build out tools beyond the county attainment profiles. These are an excellent first tool to start the conversation. So a great first step would be to bring folks together with the county attainment profile to start the conversation. But on our roadmap for the next calendar year are to also build out toolkits to support the establishment or expansion of local attainment collaboratives, a guidebook around implementing local attainment collaboratives. So again, using data that are in the profile to help drive decision making and understand success. And then, as Becky mentioned, sort of an ask for y'all right now is, we're hoping to build out our database of these promising practices and really move that online, tagged by opportunities for growth that you saw in the county attainment profiles, so that we're not only identifying them, but really helping to scale and replicate them. And again, sort of create this network of attainment advocates who can share and learn and connect with one another. So please do fill out that survey. If you're interested in diving more deeply about the work happening in your local community, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll throw my contact information in the chat. I'd be delighted to do so. Thank you.
Melissa, I put your contact info in the Q&A.
Oh, you did already.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I said, please reach out to Melissa. So that's great. And I saw Becky, I don't know if you want to respond. I know we had a question about reporting percentage of students in the county that have access. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the data point that we did include on the profiles.
Yeah, so the data point that we include on the profiles is households with a subscription with access at home to broadband. So I want to be clear, because I know that I've heard a lot of conversation as we've gone out and talked about this. This is a direct measure of households with access. This is not about, do they have the ability to get internet if they paid for it, right? So there's kind of these FCC metrics that we see about availability. This is about actual broadband subscription, a high-speed broadband subscription in the house. We coordinated with the Department of Information Technology and their work around broadband access and availability. But specifically to the point about, do we know about students? So we are using a household level one. There is an ability to understand kind of people with access to broadband, but, and I put the link to the data from the US Census Bureau in the chat. It should work. Sometimes their new website's a little glitchy, so if it doesn't work, feel free to reach out. But we can know about children under 18. We don't know about how many devices in the home. We don't know about, whether they have enough bandwidth to support, multiple kids and a parent online. Those are all very different than kind of the top level indicators that we have.
And I think that's a good point about how we developed these local profiles. So as Becky and I and our team were going around getting input on, and we continue to want to tweak them. So feedback that you guys are giving us will certainly go in as we're thinking about next versions. But we got some feedback. We did an initial version of these local profiles that didn't say a thing about broadband on it. And when we took it out, all the superintendents, and the community college presidents and the work, everybody we talked to was like, I think you guys missed something here in thinking about the context of the county. So then we went back to our friends at DIT and really worked with them to try to figure out what was the one data point, because we're trying to keep it, manageable. There's an avalanche. There's a million different data points we could put on there about broadband. Similarly, it gave us an opportunity to get some of our sectors coming up with shared data definitions. So this is an example I use too, is that we were showing these profiles initially, and we had a community college president be like, the data, the number that you guys have for dual enrollment for the CCP number is wrong for our, for our county. And what we realized is we went back, and the community college system and DPI had 2 different data definitions for enrolled in. And so we got on a Zoom call with like 20 different data folks, and everybody came to agreement. And I think that's something that these profiles are really kind of shining a light on, is making sure, and one of the reasons I think that they've been pretty well received is it gives people across, first of all, it's like a gut check on the data, because you're seeing it in kind of a 2-pager. Similarly, it is the same data for every single county in the state. So you're comparing apples to apples. When you're trying to do work across county, if they're, as a community college president, if you're representing more than one county, you know that the data is calculated the same way. Or a legislator, for example, that's been, I think we got a lot of good feedback. I don't know, Cecilia, if you want to say anything about the work that we did to engage the legislature and sharing these with them, just so the folks on the phone are kind of know what that on the phone in the Zoom, that their legislators might have heard about these too.
Certainly. A couple of things I'll hit on real quickly. We are legislated actually to present to the General Assembly's Joint Legislative Education Oversight Committee on September 1st every year. And so, for example, our policy recommendations were included in there. The county attainment profile for all 100 counties were included this year in that report that we provided to the General Assembly. In addition to that, we held a number of webinars to be able to walk key legislators through these county attainment profiles so that they could see for their own communities that they represent where their counties are currently tracking. So we're trying to educate everyone. This is a state attainment goal. This is not a my future goal. It's for everyone, whether you're a policymaker or a business leader or an education sector or just a concerned citizen. So we did take an opportunity to educate legislators, and we'll continue to do that moving forward.
Becky, I saw you were just responding to this question about deficit focused data and kind of how we've, I don't know, I think it's helpful for folks to know kind of how we've been struggling with that how we've tried to address it in some ways, but we know the data is not perfect, which, I mean, no data is perfect, but that goes to this idea of we want to continually make these better and more useful to you. So if there are data elements that are not included on here, like one of the things that we've been talking about is adding more workforce focused indicators, like maybe talking a little bit about some of the impact of those career centers. That's not really highlighted on here. Some folks have talked about our cooperative innovative high school numbers, maybe an economic development indicator. Maybe there's a better one than we have on here. We have a little bit of space, so really open to suggestion on that.
Yeah, so we're really trying to think about, as Jenny said, a lot of that stuff, other ways that we're trying to better elevate kind of, that there's a lot of possibilities to learn from are going to be in some more interactive tools that we build out over the next year or two to try to allow for more exploration of, other counties to be able to see, okay, maybe, for example, there's some really exciting stuff going on in a county that's across the state that you could learn from, that's kind of doing well in a similar area. I think this is a question that we're grappling with as well as we think about breaking out the data by economic advantage or race and ethnicity, is how can we make sure that these are productive and conversation starters that lead to opportunities and growth. And in particular, I think that also opens up an opportunity in maybe the data is the same, but the framing becomes a little bit different. And so we do want to be sensitive to that. And if you have any resources that you use when thinking about that, I would love to see them, because we're kind of new in this. And I know that a lot of data that we get is kind of more on a not meeting a bar versus how can we get something comprehensive that really helps give us something to also promote as being positive.
Yeah, and we've explored these that idea with other state agencies. Like yesterday we had a great meeting with like maybe 15 different in-state, state government agencies. One of the data points that was raised that public safety has is a county resiliency indicator. So I was like, oh, I'd love to learn more about that. And then Gretchen, I see in the Q&A, you're you note a community pride sort of indicator. I don't know if there's some additional surveys that are out there. I would certainly be open to learning more about things like that. Let's see, Chris, I didn't know if you wanted to, Chris Charbonneau, one of our team is also on today. If you wanted to talk a little bit about your work with FAFSA and targeting kind of underrepresented students and adult learners and that kind of stuff.
And also, Chris, if I might get you, you're on mute there, but if I might get you to hit on the fact that we've identified, you know, certain counties to focus on as well based on our data. So if you want to incorporate that into the messaging, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Charbonneau. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Engagement for My Future NC. And kind of the biggest initiative that I've taken on since joining My Future about 4 months ago was really looking at our FAFSA initiative. As many of you know, as students are attempting to navigate through many steps that's involved in accessing post-secondary education, the responses to COVID-19, including our school closures, social distancing guidelines, safer at home orders, have really made this a significant transition point even more challenging. So even before these disruptions, we know the pandemic has really affected certain groups of students faced with significant barriers, from everything from lack of information and misinformation about FAFSA, students that are struggling to access their parents' or guardians' financial information. Many of you have talked about this on the Q&As about access to broadband internet, desktop computers or laptops, and even a printer, language barriers, cultural concerns, and access to college counselors. So as we look at the various kind of data points and key performance indicators around this, it's not just that, you know, we have 62.3% of our students last year completing the FAFSA. We know that we have a ways to go. And it's not just going to be by pushing out different communication. That's extremely important. But we also know that creating a greater awareness for not only our schools, but for our communities to help to developing those actions that can better support various groups of students. This year, we had a very concerted focus, and we are pleased to announce that we'll be rolling this out in the January timeframe, but we've created different kinds of tracking tools in partnership with Carolina Demography to ensure that we are creating those tools of support for our schools to better serve our students and to help to identify. So we'll be rolling out a publicly facing tracker that will help our communities and our schools to be able to see where they are, how many students have completed, and then a powerful combination with what's called Finish the FAFSA, which is a CFNC tool for our counselors that has identifiable student data so that they can really see who has submitted, where are there areas whether they need verification or other things that they need to complete before moving to completion. And I think that those ways that we are able to better support our counselors, given the fact that we've got so many counselors with large caseloads, that is going to be an important tool for them to be able to use. Additionally, Melissa can talk about this as well, but we've identified 42 priority districts that either have had in the opportunities of growth that you saw in the county profiles, or they are below a certain percentage of FAFSA completions. Melissa, do you want to talk about this a little bit?
Sure. We've identified 42 FAFSA priority districts across the state. And it's sort of a mini start to getting into some of the local communities 4 months into my role at My Future NC. But again, what we really hope to do is to create a network and community around FAFSA completion. Starting in January, we're going to be hosting monthly affinity webinars for practitioners, for our school counselors and college access professionals in these 42 school districts to allow them to learn from one another, to share the challenges they may be experiencing. We'll be working with partners like CFNC to provide training to really deepen the bench of folks within the community who can support FAFSA completion efforts.
So looking at the time, we've only got about 5 more minutes, right? Where did the time go? But I did want to just make one quick note. Is Todd asked a question about industry recognized credentials. This is a topic that we are certainly talking about both at the state, and I know you guys are digging into this at the local level about which kind of non-degree credentials are valued by our state, where folks can earn, can find a job in that area, and then allows them to make a family sustaining wage. There's some work going on at the state level where we're trying to identify a North Carolina kind of endorsed list of those workforce credentials, and then think about and figure out ways to put systems in place to begin to count those credentials that we're earning in a systematic way. So that'll be part of the work. My Future NC is partnering with some of our sector leaders, with Commerce, with the community college system, with DPI, with the governor's office, and we'll continue to kind of push out information as those initial draft lists come up, but that's absolutely a point of consideration. And then I don't know, Jenny, did you want to let it sounds like Gretchen had a question, had her hand up. I didn't know if we wanted to open it up quickly or just transition straight to Cecilia kind of wrapping us up. Oh, good. Gretchen's going to jump on.
Hi, I think I might have accidentally raised my hand, but I just had the questions around like strengths-based data and how to use that. And I was really, just interested with the public safety data that you mentioned. I didn't know if that was on a federal level or where that's located.
No, we just had the initial conversation about that, yesterday? Was that yesterday? God, you can't keep up. But yes, it was just yesterday. It was with our in-state partners. So I think we'll certainly be exploring that more. And I noted you guys listed some other kind of resiliency sort of data. I know there's some really good work. I think Becky and I looked, the folks in Buncombe County, we're doing a lot of work on kind of resiliency and early indicators for identifying students, kind of early warning systems for some of those data systems. So we're definitely open and would love to learn more as you guys find good data points for stuff like that. We're certainly open and interested to learning more. And with that, Cecilia, I'll turn it over to you. You're going to bring it home, right? Wrap us up.
Perfect. Thank you, Jenny. Before I do, if I can get you to stick a couple of things in the chat, make sure that the last thing, everybody has our contact information. Please, we encourage you to reach out. We would love to hear from you. We cannot do this work without you. Also, put nccareers.org in there. That's a tool that's very helpful, and it speaks to credentials and alignment with the workforce, and trying to make sure that we keep the educational labor market aligned in your local communities as well. I'm going to click and share my screen real quickly just to do a quick wrap up. So the first thing I want everybody to walk away with, North Carolina's demographics are rapidly changing. And in order to meet our goal, there's absolutely no way we're going to do it without a focus on the underserved and underrepresented populations. It is the right thing to do. Absolutely. It provides economic mobility and economic prosperity for every citizen. We believe that educational attainment is the short-term recovery strategy and the long-term resiliency plan for our state's economy coming out of this pandemic. So we encourage everyone to hear the cry. Please, everything that you can do, go back home, try to lift up or start up some cross-sector collaboratives, start the conversation, if nothing else. You just heard the comments around the work around FAFSA. We do have 42 priority districts, but it's a priority for all 100 counties. As a state and as a nation, the number of applications for federal student aid are drastically down. If that's an indicator of the individuals that are going to go on to post-secondary education, we're going to see significant impacts coming out of this pandemic. So the more that we can get students to complete the FAFSA, the better off we are. The other piece is, if you're a business on here, if you are in any position to offer work-based learning opportunities that also allow for adults to go back and earn and learn at the same time, this provides adults a paycheck while also going back to get some sort of degree or credential. And then the last piece, if we can encourage you to endorse our goal, if you go to our website, you'll be able to see a drop down, and Jenny can stick a link in the Chad as well, endorse our 2030 goal and partner with My Future NC in any ways possible. For those that have a moment to stay on, there is going to be a brief survey we would love for you to be able to fill out and give us feedback on today's session. We hope to hear from you, and thanks again for your interest.